one.
Hello, I'm Fleur Sexton and I'm delighted to be here tonight with Andy Street, who is Mayor of the West Midlands. So it's lovely to have you here with us tonight, Andy. And the purpose of this evening is so that people can ask questions to Andy and put any questions to him that you'd like to. So today is the opportunity for the people of Coventry to put their questions. This will last for 1 hour. So the event is being recorded. It's not live, but clips will be used for social media. And any messages that are not answered during this hour, please email them. The moderator has provided the email address in the chat function, so please send your questions on if they're not answered. So, Andy, great to have you here.
Well, it's lovely to be here, Fleur. And first thing I should do is thank you for hosting this. We
Pleasure.
wanted a distinguished Coventry character. And as we know, Fleur runs a great Coventry business, so it only seemed a great idea to invite Fleur, but I'm really appreciative that you've agreed to do this. And you can probably confirm that I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the next hour. So it all depends on the questions that come from those on the line. So we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off with the first question. So it's really important to the people of Coventry, our green belt. So we have got some really good green belt in Coventry. So the first question is, what have you been doing to protect these green belt areas?
So thank you very much, Fleur. And I know this issue really matters, particularly around the west side of Coventry and down to the south, where most of the city's green belt is actually. And I've tried very hard over the last few years to prevent the erosion of the green belt, particularly in Coventry, but across the whole of the West Midlands. Should say right at the beginning, though, that doesn't mean I'm against building homes. Actually, in the 4 years I've been mayor, we've really got on and increased our house building rapidly. So the numbers, the last 2 years, this is up to July last year, we're actually 17,000 homes a year. And that was double the rate we were achieving just 4 or 5 years ago. So we have stepped forward to build homes, but overwhelmingly, they have been on brownfield land. And in Coventry, where the City Council have a local plan, which is encouraging green belt development, at Easton Green, at Kersley, and actually not in their own boundary, but supporting over the way in Kings Hill. I have been vociferous in trying to oppose that. And we're actually now at the point where I've actually written with Gary Ridley, the leader of the Conservative group on Coventry City Council, asking the Secretary of State to call in, i.e. to prevent the planning permission that the City Council have given for the huge development at Easton Green. So we're taking it right as far as we can.
Thank you. Second question. The most exciting thing that we've got, everybody is so excited about in Coventry at the minute, is of course the fact that we have been awarded City of Culture 2021, which is absolutely amazing. So the question is, what impact do you think City of Culture will have on Coventry?
Oh, it's going to be brilliant. And isn't it just wonderful that a little God was shining on us when it was agreed that City of Culture would start on, get this the right way round, the 15th of May, and that the first really big relaxation in terms of people being able to eat inside, what have you, will be on the 17th of May. So there's been a wonderful coincidence of the roadmap with City of Culture. So that's brilliant. But I mean, I think the first thing I should say, Fleur, is the combined authority under my leadership has been huge supporters of City of Culture. Right back to 2017 when we were trying to bid to win it. Obviously, it was fantastic. It was secured. But then we put on the table £35 million of investment in Coventry for City of Culture. 31 million is actually for all the physical works that's been done to prepare the city for the City of Culture. So if you go into the precinct and see where there's big works to be done, we basically paid for those. And I feel really, really proud that we've done that. And we've also put £4 million on for what you might call the normal revenue budget for City of Culture. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity to show the world just how wonderful Coventry is, basically. We're still expecting a huge numbers of visitors, maybe slightly less physically, but lots virtually as well. And of course, there's also, and you're very much involved in this, the wonderful opportunity around jobs and training opportunities And I've been very pleased the Combined Authority has been able to do a programme with your organisation, preparing people for the hospitality, the event management that will come for a City of Culture, and taking young unemployed people and giving them that opportunity to get those new skills.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And that leads on to my next question, which is City of Culture is not the only positive news that we've had in the city. There's been a great level of city regeneration, which has been taking place recently, which you've just spoken about as well. How has this been possible? Can you give us a bit more information on how this regeneration?
Yeah, no, with pleasure.
What actions still need to be taken? So what else is coming for Coventry City Centre? So, yeah, okay, there's so much in this. So I talked about how we put 31 million in for the existing public realm works, but in a sense, that's just the beginning, I'd probably say. So other things that are happening in the city, of course, is the rebuild of the station. So important, because any city should have a graceful arrival place. And the previous Coventry station served us well since 1960 something, but we need a really, really fantastic arrival. And anyone who's been near the station recently can see that happening there. So really exciting. And of course, the Combined Authority put in half the money for that scheme. I think it was the single biggest pot of the money, actually. And then just next to it, Friargate, that big development, which will be offices, commercial, hotel, the next big office space, Friargate 2, the BDIs will have seen the hoardings have gone up and the pile drivers are just in. Again, we've lent the money for making that happen, £50 million. So really exciting. And then as you go into the main city, of course, the city centre south, the southern half of the precinct, as the name would imply. And I think it's genuinely exciting that a collaboration between Guy Shearer Developments and indeed the City Council and the WMCA is bringing forward what will actually, I think, be the best city centre regeneration scheme anywhere in the country. You ask what the status of it, we've reserved £98 million. It's a huge sum of money, and it's what's actually making it possible. I repeat, £98 million. I think, oh my goodness, it's a lot of money to commit. And they're at the planning application stage. I hope the city will agree. I'm sure they will, actually. And then we'll need actually to push on with the development. But it is genuinely exciting, because I see it almost like a new generation of city centre regeneration, led by city centre living, some retail, some commercial, but also a brilliant performance space right in the middle of it, which I think is much more about what a city centre is going to be about in the next sort of decade, rather than, of course, all the city centre generations previously were led by retail. We know retail's challenged, so it's brilliant to see this regeneration thinking differently. And I actually think, mark my words, Coventry will lead Britain in this if that comes to pass. Yeah, it is certainly very exciting walking around Coventry City Centre at the minute. There is so much going on, so really excited to see.
Well, we've got to be ready. We've got to be ready for May the 17th, so I guess so.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Next question. I know that one of the things that you are very passionate about is the Gigafactory site.
Oh, yes.
So could you tell us your vision for that, please, and also the impact you think that will have on the city and the area in the future?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Fleur. So let me just explain why the Gigafactory is so important, because people say, well, what's this all about? So let's just explain. Obviously, the automotive industry is our biggest success story in the West Midlands, fantastically successful. And of course, JLR is the poster child for that Coventry-based company. But it's changing really fast. It's going to be electrified. We know we can't sell petrol and diesel cars after 2030. So the future will be electric cars, and the heart of the electric car will be the battery. 40% of the value of the car in the battery. So really successful places have got to manufacture these batteries, and the Gigafactory is where they will be manufactured. So what I've been trying to do is persuade the government to put the money on the table that will actually subsidise that Gigafactory build. There isn't one built anywhere in the world that doesn't have national government subsidy. So we needed that. We've now got it. So it was agreed in last autumn's comprehensive spending review. So there's £500 million there, and we can bid into it. So when we announced a month ago now that that site at Coventry Airport would be the location for it, I would say all the ingredients are coming together. We've got a site. I'm sure we'll work well with the City Council on that, with the local council in Warwick as well. We've got the government subsidy. We've got all the customers in the region there. What we now need is a big investor. How many jobs will it bring? 4,000 jobs it's expected to bring in the one factory, but I would say it will probably help protect and sort of grow the numbers. Every single job in the automotive industry is indirectly going to be linked to this in time. So really important investment for Coventry. Very proud to be leading the charge to get it, actually.
Lovely, thank you very much, thank you. Next question. Infrastructure across the region is critical to your remit and to your role. And I also know that central to this focus is transport, so transport links. So the question is, what have you been doing to improve transport for us here in Coventry?
For you in Coventry? So there's actually lots of good news on this, actually. So the hottest news, of course, which induced the Prime Minister to come to Coventry last Monday, was that we have won the bid to become the all-electric bus city. And that will mean that every single bus in Coventry is replaced with an all-electric bus, brilliant for clean air. And that will be over the next 4 years, I think it is, actually. This is 50 million of government money, brilliant support from the operators like Stagecoach, National Express, a bit of money from the combined authority, but just fantastic to win the competition against everywhere in the country to get that. And if you want to go and have a look at these brand new buses, they're already running on the 9 and 9A routes across the city, but they will be absolute state-of-the-art, clean public transport. Then the other things that we've been doing, of course, we've got the improvement at Coventry Station, as I've already talked about, and that will in time allow the improvement in the cross-Coventry line, Leamington to Nuneaton. We've got just launched, this is exciting, this is having to wait for this, just launched what we call, and it sounds a piece of jargon, this demand responsive transport. So it's where you can, like a bus on an app, if that makes sense. Like you order your Uber app, you'll be able to order your bus on an app, and we're trialling it down at Warwick University, particularly used for those areas that aren't particularly dense. And of course, if you carry on with buses, probably the most important thing of all, fares have been frozen completely for 4 years. And for people who have no option but the bus, that's really important. And I don't think anywhere else has achieved that across the country. And then, of course, now we're putting in our bids for new stations in Coventry at Cowden Road, at Fowes Hill, and of course at Binley. We've had success winning new stations opening in Birmingham and the Black Country. Coventry's turn next. And of course, we've also got the cycle hire launching in just a couple of weeks' time, or no, a month's time, my apologies. So this is, you'll be able to have bikes like the Boris bike in London coming to Coventry before the end of April. And of course, the e-scooters, which we started off the trial in central Coventry, they didn't go completely smoothly, but that will also be coming back as well to, I think, the University of Warwick area. So there's actually lots that's really practical, and that's before the really big scheme, sorry, long answer, Fleur, the really big scheme, which is the very light rail scheme, where we will be running a light transit system in time, probably, well, committed, but probably first route out to the hospital, and that's currently under development. A Coventry company built the new carriage, and it's now being tested on our very light rail track in Dudley. And we've put in a fair chunk of the money for that as well. So hopefully that will be genuinely a made in the West Midlands new very light rail scheme.
Wonderful, thank you very much, thank you. So finally, the question from me before we open it up to the floor. Amid a global pandemic, the economy has notably been struggling. So yeah. I think this is close to a lot of people's hearts. What regional activities have taken place regarding jobs and investment in this area? So jobs, yes, it's the word of the day, isn't it? So we were doing well with the job situation pre-pandemic, and particularly actually in Coventry and Warwickshire. But we've had a horrible sideswipe, as your question implies. So we haven't got the exact data yet, but we've probably lost nearly 100,000 jobs across the West Midlands through the pandemic. I mean, horrible, because that's lives and stories and all of that. However, what we've come together to say is we've got a plan, I call it the mayoral jobs plan, to get back at least 100,000 jobs in just 2 years. So that'd be the most rapid increase in jobs we've ever seen. Some things are, of course, about the sectors that we've got to defend. Coming back in hospitality, of course, coming back in leisure, that will be important. Some of it is about really going back to the sectors that were doing really well pre-pandemic,
particularly construction would be a brilliant example there. But then we've also got to think about the new growth sectors. So when we talk about building back better, these green economy sectors, the gigafactory would be an example of that. And then we've also, of course, got to think about retraining people for the growth areas. And again, you know about this very well. There are some areas of our economy that have been very robust. So whether it be healthcare jobs, whether it be in the digital sector, whether it actually be in construction will come back as well. So the work that we're doing, and we talk about with our colleges, sector, academy work with our colleges to get people those skills. And we're looking with young people at least 30,000 retraining opportunities across the West Midlands to get them back into work. So the key point, Fleur, is, yeah, it's been tough, but we have a very clear plan. And what Cameron will do, actually, the moderator, is just put the link to the clear plan in the chat. So if anyone wants to see what's the detail that he's talking about, it's all there, and you will see all the numbers are worked out. It's not fantasy, it's a real clear plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So now we're going to go to the floor and questions that we've got from people who are listening. So the first one is from Ravinder Sangha, who says, question for Andy Street: when is Coventry going to get more cycle lanes, and why don't new roads specifically have compulsory cycle lanes?
Okay, really good question. So Coventry is definitely going to get a major new segregated cycle lane along the Binley Road. We've put the funding in, and the combined authority, the City Council, are just signing off the design of it. So it is coming. And I have to say, Ravinder, I am very pleased that it's the combined authority that has actually driven that through, because Coventry needs that dedicated cycle lane. I am utterly certain that once we've got that first real high quality dedicated cycle lane, it will be the catalyst for more. And if you want to see the detail of what more is planned, we have something called the Starley Network, named after the Coventry cycle manufacturer, James Starley, all comes from Coventry. And we've actually shown on there the different routes we want to fill in as we steadily, frankly, get more cash and can invest in more lanes. But if I could see you, I'd look you in the eye and say absolutely categoric reassurance that we do want to do that. And what we will do, picking up your wider point, is as we put in other public transport infrastructure, we will put, or other transport infrastructure, we will put the cycle lane in with it rather than have to come back to retrofit. So absolutely, Ravinder, take your point.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Alex Robinson, who says, gigafactories, just how realistic is our chance of investment coming in compared with competing locations? And then he goes on to say, I like Andy's proposals for new railway stations, but how about proper charging infrastructure for electric cars? Is it fair? Should we split that into two? So we'll take the first.
Yeah, there's two different questions, yeah.
How realistic is our chance of investment coming in compared with competing locations?
It's a very fair question, actually. And the answer is deadly serious, deadly realistic. And it's sort of got to be. Now, let me just explain, though, why I'm not too stressed by this. We've got to get it. But the estimates say there will probably be about 7 gigafactories when all vehicle production turns to it. And by the way, it won't just be for vehicles in time, it will also be for domestic energy storage, for example. The battery will be important. People talk about it for trains, people talk about it eventually for aeroplanes. I don't know about that, but it will really grow. Now, I want us to be first of those 7, but it is not a catastrophe if we are second, for example. And the reason I think we'll be in the first 2 is so far only 2 parts of the country have declared an interest, us and the North East. And when the government talked about the £500 million to subsidise this, they talked about it being sufficient for 2. And I think that's about the right maths, actually, in terms of the scale of it. So there is a proposal that's been developed in the North East, but if I'm honest, it's a bit flaky. Our proposal, it does still need an international investor behind it, but we've got an incredible advantage that we've got all of those users, those vehicle users of the ultimate battery right here on the doorstep. And as they're big, heavy things to transport, there's a huge advantage of having it made where it's going to be used. So honestly, I think this is an incredibly realistic proposal, and there are only, at the moment, there are only 2 runners in this particular race. So we've got to make damn sure that we do have victory in this race, and we've actually not got to be too fussed about what's going on in the northeast as well. Hopefully that's
Thank you
clear.
very much. Thank you. So part 2 of Alex's question is, I like Andy's proposals for new railway stations, but how about proper charging infrastructure for electric cars? Is it fair to say that what we have at the moment is more a token gesture?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that might surprise you that I give you such a straightforward answer, but it isn't good enough. I agree with you. Let's just be clear, and maybe your question was implying this. The charging for cars is utterly compatible with the move towards public transport, because no one believes that we're going to be able to do without the car. This is, in terms of addressing the climate change crisis, there are 2 ingredients to this. Some people will be persuaded to give up their car or use it less and use public transport. Some people will not be able to do that because of their lifestyle, and then they will need to go to a clean car, an electric car, hence the charging. So actually both parts of this are critical. And it's slightly technical point, this, but I think who asked the question will be interested in this. What we did on Friday at the Combined Authority Board, we signed off the first 5 years of our 2041 carbon neutrality plan. And you can see in that, and again, that's available publicly, that actually moving to clean is just as important as moving to public transport. We've got to do both to succeed. And the answer on the charging is it's nowhere near good enough at the moment. To be fair, Coventry City Council have done a decent job at getting local charging infrastructure. I think I'll have this wrong. It's about 262 charging points across the city, but compared to others, it's not, they're no slackers, and they're very good. But we need much bigger scale than that. We need super fast, rapid chargers, as it's called. We've put a proposal in the Combined Authority to government to do that with private sector funding as well. And as yet, we haven't got a breakthrough. So the questioner is absolutely right. We do need something much more dramatic if by 2030, we're going to get a huge proportion of people turned over to it.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Alex, for that question. Next is from Barbara Mosterman, who says, I'm curious how the Housing First project is succeeding in Coventry. Are there any number of homes that have been available for the homeless in Coventry?
So, Barbara, thank you for asking this question, because Fleur and I were talking about this the other day. I'm really pleased you've asked, because 4 years ago, if we'd done one of these or a hosting, I would have probably wagered money on the fact that the rough sleeping question would have been one of the first ones. But actually, it's talked about less now. Still, I know people are still very concerned about it, but we have made real progress. And that's actually why I think it's less front of mind for people now than it was 4 years ago. So Housing First, just so everybody knows, is the scheme that we're piloting. It's funded by government, I have to say, and it's across all of the West Midlands. And the idea is that people who are either rough sleeping or at risk of rough sleeping, so have nowhere to go, but maybe just sofa surfing or something, are offered a permanent place of their own. To be really clear, it's not grand. It's probably a shared accommodation place or a little flat, but it's a place you can close the door at the end of the day and say, this is mine, my place of safety. I'm building my life from here. And Barbara, yes, there have been a lot of people moved into this already. The number across the whole region is 377 people. I cannot remember the number for Coventry. I'm sorry that I can't remember each borough off the top of my head. Coventry have not been top at it, actually. Walsall have been the best performing. So there's a little bit to go, but Coventry have been, they've done a goodly number, but I'm sorry, Barbara, I can't remember the exact number, but we can get it and flash it up on the screen, maybe. But across the whole conurbation, it's 377. And just to give you the idea of the proportions here, the total number of people sleeping rough last November when the annual count is done on the streets, and I hate the word of the count, it sounds so inhuman, but it is what's done, was just 44 people rough sleeping on the whole of the West Midlands. And the numbers there in Coventry had fallen really dramatically over the last 2 years. So actually really pleasing everywhere. So 377 housed, just 44 left a rough sleeping last November. So I hope this is fair. It's an enormous success, actually.
Thank you very much. So that was Barbara's question. And the next one is anonymous. So somebody's asked this question: with the new transport infrastructure and rebuild of the city centre, gigafactory, profile and opportunities from the City of Culture project, what can local young people do to secure their future careers?
Yeah, great question. If what's meant by the question is where do I go and find out what's on offer for me, I'd call one particular thing out, then we'll broaden it a bit. So there is a huge challenge to young people, and I know that there is an enormous increase in young unemployed people. If you are one of them or know someone's one of them, we've pulled together all the sort of advisories, resort, all the sort of places of advice for young people into one thing that we call the youth platform. Now, each city will have its own hub as well, called the Youth Hub. We haven't physically opened in Coventry yet, for obvious reasons, but we will as soon as we can. And the idea of this hub and platform is every bit of advice that you could possibly want is there. So about college programs, about career advice, about what the DWP youth coaches can do to help you move into something which, again, Fleur will know very well about. So it is all there in one place. So if you have got a young person who just wants to look, just go onto the website under WMCA Youth Platform or DWP Youth Platform, because we're doing it with the DWP, and then just put Coventry. You will see all the sort of advice of resources, places, training programs, all there in one place. But perhaps the most important simplistic answer I'd give after saying that very practical thing is what we've really tried to do for young people, given this situation, is think about the training opportunities that there are. And I talked about this in response to the job piece. So obviously, Kickstarters, that's the government scheme. I think there are now 7,000 Kickstarter places live across the West Midlands. So there's an opportunity. And then this thing, which sounds a bit of jargon, we didn't get any marketing awards for this, the sector-based work academies with all our colleges, saying, and there are 10,000 places here across the West Midlands to say, what skill can I learn in one of my colleges? So whether it needs to be in digital retraining, whether it needs to be in health and social care, whether it needs to be in engineering, whatever, so that you get a skill there. So my simplistic advice would be follow up one of those opportunities to get yourself that skill that will then move you into work. And we've tried really hard to make sure there are plentiful opportunities.
Thank you. Next question is from Divya. I hope I pronounced that right. This past academic year has been difficult for university students. How much can be done to support universities like the University of Warwick, which is a fantastic red brick university and a great asset to our area?
So, oh, well, wow. University of Warwick is just a jewel in the crown for the region, isn't it, really? And if you look at what it's done, particularly all the work it's done through the Warwick Manufacturing Group, it's just incredible. I always say, I'm not just saying this answer this question, behind any of the region's successes, there tends to be a university that's done the thinking, actually. So hugely, hugely important. What can be done to support? So I think that question can be taken in a couple of ways. First of all, when the pandemic first struck, actually, I was very quick to get alongside the university vice chancellors to think about what they were wanting to get from government in terms of support. So I hope they would say, yeah, I was there in my regional representative role, working with them, thinking about the support they could get. There are some very practical things as well, as we tried to get international students back. How easy was it for them to come back? What were the rules around that? Or the sort of travel things? That's a practical thing that can be done. But then probably the most important thing of all is just partnering with them on research projects that will lead to jobs of the future. And as I say, we do lots of work with the Warwick Manufacturing Group. They're hugely involved in this whole electrification piece. So that's actually, in a sense, partnering with the academics at the university there. So I can't stress it too much. There's so many, they play such a role in our city and our region's future. And I hope we've really tried to work with them absolutely hand in glove. And of course, this demand responsive travel piece, That's been trialled at Warwick University as well. So just a small thing, but there it is. And it just talks about a different part of the university. There, I think it's the estates management piece that we work with them, which is a lovely example as well.
Thank you. Next question is from Wasim, who says, many factories and foundries have closed across the region over the last 30 years or so. Do you have any ideas about how to innovate these spaces and derelict sites?
Well, we have to be careful here, because it would be very easy to say turn them into other uses. And I'm not quite sure where Wasim is from, because not necessarily everyone's from Coventry on the call. So I will say this actually. Just last Friday, we announced a big development in Albury in Sandwell, where there is actually an old factory being turned into a new housing scheme, 234, I think it is, homes. And the WMCA has put in, I think it's 3.5 million to clean up the site for that new use. So in one sense, that's a classic answer, isn't it? Let's not let them lay derelict, as the question implies, and let's bring them back to use. But another part of me says that shouldn't be where we're heading. Some of them are still very dynamic businesses, and we've actually got to make sure they continue to thrive. Now, what can I do there? Well, I suppose there's probably 3 quick things. Number one, the Brexit deal was very important for that sector. So hopefully I was absolutely consistent in lobbying for a deal rather than a no deal. The second thing is, obviously, a lot of those foundries are in the metal, obviously in the metal industry, and then the strength of the economy, particularly automotive at the end of that, very important. And of course, also the skills development for the future. And one of the really exciting things we're doing in the Black Country as well with the foundries is thinking about how we can actually decarbonize those processes as well. And hopefully they then can have a green future in terms of energy use, a green future there as well. So there are various bits I can do, but I wasn't quite sure if the question was about how do you use it after the business, sadly in some cases, go under, or about how we make sure they're dynamic businesses going forward.
How do you have any ideas how to innovate these spaces and derelict sites? I think it's when the companies have closed.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Well, then the answer, purely by chance, from Albury on Friday is the perfect answer, that instead of allowing it to lay derelict, and I didn't bring this out in the discussion about Greenbelt right at the beginning, I probably should just explain. The way we can bring these places back to life is because we have a brownfield redevelopment fund. I will use the word I for this because it is true. I negotiated that with central government. It's over £450 million now. And what we do is we use it to pay for cleaning up sites that then become viable in their own commercial right. And if we hadn't negotiated that, there are lots of sites, slightly less in Coventry, far more elsewhere in the conurbation, where there's more derelict sites that are actually coming back to use. And actually, I look back at the last 4 years, it's one of the things I'm really proud of, that we're managing to bring some of those communities back to vibrancy.
Thank you. Next question is from Kate, who says, what time span is realistic for the completion of the Gigafactory?
There's lots of questions about the Gigafactory, aren't there? So the interesting word completion, I think realistic for completion is 2020, end of 24, 25. So planning will probably take a year. The deal with the external supplier, probably best part of this year. And then actually just the actual construction, all of that, it's probably, well, the finances, the deal, all of that. So, and then the construction itself will probably be best part of 2 years. I mean, this is a massive, complicated thing. So 24, 25, but that's okay if you think of the speed at which we've got to transfer to electric vehicles. But it is also right, implication of Kate's question, we've got to get on with it. We can't have the grass growing around us in this, because there's an international race for this. And of course, the government have said by 2030, no more petrol and diesel cars.
Thank you. We've now got another question about Greenbelt. It's from Asha, and she says, what is your plan to stop development on our Greenbelt?
Thank you, Asha. I know where you are calling from. So I think I've said a bit about this already. So where the City Council have given a consent that I do not agree with, very simply, it is to ask the Secretary of State to review it. And the reason that that is right is that I just do not believe that it is necessary to meet for that land at Eastern Green, for example, to be taken up by housing development. And the reason I say that is we know for a fact that the local plan that the City Council put together is based on widely over ambitious assumptions around the numbers of homes that will be needed. The Office for National Statistics have made it very clear that in their annual review of the Coventry housing need, it is nowhere near what it was supposed to be. I think they're about 5,000 homes wrong. So I have asked the leader of the City Council to review his plan so he does not have to continue to do this, because once the greenbelt is gone, it is gone. So he has not accepted that, and therefore I have asked the Secretary of State to intervene. And that really is the nuclear button. More broadly than that, though, Fleur, the answer across the whole conurbation is the more we can do on brownfield, the less we have to do on greenbelt. And there is more brownfield, as I've said elsewhere, so it's easier. But even in Coventry, there is some brownfield. And I'll just give you a classic example of this. Abbots Lane, the old gasworks just on the ring road. There was a planning application for that. The planning committee turned it down. That would have been 700 homes, I believe, in that space. So we've got a perfectly good brownfield site turned down, whilst at the same time, the City Council's giving planning consent for the green belt of Eastern Green. It is just not right. And Coventry, frankly, I have admiration for many things that goes on with Coventry and their council, but this is completely wrong, and we have to stop it in its tracks.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Tarang, who says, if we are looking to replace petrol and diesel cars with electric, what arrangements have been planned for car charging stations?
So I did say earlier on, there was another question on this. I can't remember the name of the gentleman who asked me the question, but Tarang, there's two answers to this. Well, there's three. Number one, it's not being done well enough. I accept that. Number two, there are some small charging stations that have already come in that the city have helped provide, and there are some on supermarket car parks and all that, and that's progress. But the third big answer, Tarang, is the need to be, we call them rapid charging stations, and they would be dedicated places for these big junctions, easy places to get to, where you'd literally be there and charge, as the title implies, rapidly. We've put together a proposal with a sort of business model of how we would make this work. We do need some money from government. They, by the way, have put £1 billion aside, the government have put aside for this, but they haven't yet started to spend it out. So what we're doing is saying, we've got a proposal, let's have some of that money, let's get on with this, because we do, as Tarang says, need to be making much, much more rapid progress.
Thank you.
Watch this space, we've got to keep going.
Next question is from Max, who says, how can HS2 benefit Coventry? Will it just benefit Birmingham?
Definitely not. I mean, everybody knows I was a great believer in HS2, and it's a fair question to say, hang on a minute, Coventry isn't getting a station. So let's just explain how it will benefit Coventry. First of all, I hope there'll be jobs in the construction. Let's just be clear about that. I know it's not the essence of the question, but it is important. Currently 12,000 jobs in the construction of HS2, that will grow. I hope that our local companies will get a very good share of those contracts. So there's a piece there. But longer term, it actually puts Coventry very, very close to the heart of what will be the new spine of public transport in the whole of the country. And from Interchange Station in Solihull to Coventry, I think it's 5 miles to the edge of Coventry for that. So particularly if you're travelling north, that will be a perfect service for Coventry. And obviously we've got to make sure that the linkages between Interchange and straight into Coventry are really good, and that will definitely be done. But the other big advantage that Coventry gets from HS2 is it means that capacity on the main line is freed up, so we can actually invest in other services. And I hope, for example, the current 3 trains an hour that's been run by, well, was pre-pandemic 3 trains an hour, run by Avanti. I've always lobbied for maintaining that, And I hope we might actually be able to think a bit more laterally about the service serving Coventry if the main, let's say Birmingham London Express, is different. So it's that capacity on the existing line, and that commuter service from Birmingham to Coventry obviously has been fighting with the express trains. We will have a dedicated line in the future. So there's an advantage there. So actually, I think there are a number of advantages to Coventry from HS2, even though I fully accept they're not as apparent initially as they are for Birmingham.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Next question we've got is from Zayed Raymond, who says,
oh, yeah.
It's been great to hear about your plans for the city and the economy. As we ease out of COVID restrictions, how do you see the recovery of high streets, such as that of my local Earlston Street?
Oh, Zayed, yeah, lovely. So I'm quite encouraged by the prospects for real local high street recovery. And I'm sorry, Zayed, this is in your old ward, not your new ward. I often talk about the Coventry Road parade, actually, in Coventry, because I see that just in Charlesmore, not in Earlston, as a really good example of the point I'm about to make. The pandemic has actually helped real local high streets because people haven't wanted to travel into the city centre or go to a crowded out-of-town retail park. And they're very happy to be served locally. And where the shops are genuinely doing that local thing, they're really thriving. And if you just look along the Coventry Road there, it actually is a really good example of that. So what I hope will happen in Earlston, Zayed, is actually that whole sort of sense of shop local will come back strongly. And you will see local businesses opening up. I know there are some vacancies at the moment on Earlston High Street. It's been a very strong high street over the years. I know it's a big challenge at the moment, but I actually think that whole notion of an immediate local area, as Earlston so well typifies, will come back. So I'd be reasonably optimistic for a place like that. The much bigger challenge is for the city centre, not necessarily Coventry, but city centres, town centres, where you've got all the chain stores that won't necessarily be there in the future. And they will see dramatic change because they can't play the local card. And we're going to have to think about how we regenerate our town and city centres. But for the local high street, let's just run through it. Let's make sure parking is free for short periods, easy. Let's make sure public transport is good quality, accessible, quick. Let's make sure the public realm, street safety, lighting, all of those things are good. And then let's make sure that there is a really good spread of local retailers, maybe even with, I know Earlston does this sometimes in the even with a little local market or something. The shop local piece is a huge way back from this.
Thank you. Next question is from Raj, who says, today they have announced the mascot for the Commonwealth Games.
Oh, yes, Perry.
Yeah, Perry. And a lot is made about the legacy of the Games. For
Yes.
What will be the legacy of the 2021 City of Culture?
Oh, the legacy of the City of Culture. I was anticipating the wrong question. Teaches me. I think one word, actually, and it's impossible to put a price on this word, but the word is pride. When the bid was being done, and brilliant people led the bid, but I always said when I was candidate I would back the bid down the line. I hope I did. I hope I had a few of the necessary conversations behind the scenes with people as well, but let's be clear, the bid team won it. But in that period, I always said what would happen is it would give the country and indeed citizens of Coventry an opportunity to sort of reimagine what Coventry is really like. Because in common with other cities of the West Midlands, Coventry hasn't always had the best image. But actually, I think it's an image that's improving already, well before City of Culture. We've had some big victories recently, of course. And I think it can go a long, long way, actually. And that is both nationally, the image and reputation of Coventry, because we'll be so in the sort of spotlight with all the work with the BBC, for example, but also the pride that Coventrians have in their own city. And I think everything that's thought about a community celebration of City of Culture is very, very important. So I want at the end of it Coventrians to have a bit of swagger, and investors from around the country, correspondents from around the country, to actually think, wow, in an incredibly difficult circumstance, they did that really well. That's a place that deserves huge respect, indeed affection. And I think affection would go a very long way with given the history of Coventry.
Thank you. Next question is from Alex, who says, gigafactories, you mentioned the need for international partners.
Yes.
Looking to candidates. What about Toyota, whose factory is just 1 hour down the road?
Yeah, really interesting. So when I talked about international partners, I didn't mean Toyota, BMW, Mini, Honda. I meant the companies that actually make the battery. Now, these people are predominantly Chinese companies. There is a Korean company, Samsung, and I think there could be a Japanese company as well, but predominantly Chinese. And they're the ones who, and they're not household names, they're names behind the scenes, who we've got to get to come and operate this place. So that's what I mean by the partner. But was it Alex? Yeah, Alex's question is very interesting though, because you're absolutely right. Toyota, BMW, Vauxhall, they probably do need to come on board as customers. And exactly what the relationship is with them between the international supplier, investor, and them remains to be seen. So yeah, they will be critical partners of the success, but of course, the immediate customer on the doorstep, which is bigger than any other auto manufacturer in the UK, is of course JLR. And that's the really big bait that an international investor will see, given JLR have given their massive commitment to electrification. And just remember, because it just rolls off the tongue, this number, but it's vast. They talked about investing £2.5 billion a year in their move to electrification. I mean, it's an enormous sum. It would make them easily the biggest industrial investor in the UK. So the bait is they are right nearby. But yes, Alex is right. A relationship with Toyota, BMW, Mini in Oxford, none of it very far away, gives us a real advantage, particularly over the northeast, where if we're really blunt, they've got one customer in Nissan.
Okay, thank you. Next question is one very close to everybody's heart, I think.
Oh yeah.
And he says, I'm an ardent Coventry City supporter.
Oh yeah.
So much for getting the Sky Blues back playing at the Ricoh Arena. I remember the early 90s as the last good times we had on the pitch. Can you tell us a bit about how you managed to achieve bringing us back home?
What was the name of the question? I didn't quite hear, Fleur.
Abdul.
Abdul. Okay. So, well, Abdul, I probably saw you at Highfield Road in the early 90s. I went a few times to see my team. Going to get in trouble now, playing in claret and blue, Aston Villa, play at Highfield Road. And yes, happy days. Anyway, so I am delighted that the Sky Blues are going back to the Ricoh, back to Coventry, into their home. The story is really very, very simple. There's no great scoop or intrigue here. I've known for some years that it's wrong. It was wrong that Coventry were not rooted in their home city. And I did say right back at the hustings last mayoral election at the Coventry Cathedral hustings that if there was anything I could do to help ease the situation between Coventry City and Wasps, then I would do it. Nothing happened for a couple of years, but the winter of 2019 going into 2020, when they'd just been moved to Birmingham to play at St Andrews, I had individual chats with the owner of the club and indeed the chairman of Wasps. And it became apparent to me that both of them knew that something had to change. And I thought, well, then we've got goodwill on both sides. So the proposal was made that we should start a mediation program. I was the mediator. They came along and we started to get together March of last year, 2020. And it's been a long road, as these difficult mediations often are, when there's so much history. And if I'm honest, there wasn't a lot of trust between either side at the beginning, given the bad blood that there had been. But I sort of knew in my heart of hearts that we would get there because there was actually developing goodwill. And all I will say of Derek Richardson, who leads Wasps, and Joyce Apala, who leads Coventry City, is both of them have been very, very magnanimous and broad-shouldered about this. And lo and behold, we've got to the right outcome. And as I say, I knew it would happen because there was that underlying goodwill and determination. So hopefully that answers the question, Abdul.
Thanks very much. We've got one more question, which is, with headlines today on the BBC suggesting the UK was heading towards a catastrophic digital skills shortage and that young people taking IT subjects have dropped by 40% since 2015. Do you feel that now is the time to invest in programmes for IT and digital for young adults who have missed out at school?
Yes. Great question. Categorical answer, yes. Is that if you look at the job vacancies there are at the moment, even in the teeth of the pandemic across the West Midlands, there are a lot of vacancies in the digital and IT sectors. So, and our own experience of this is we run what we call these digital boot camps, where we take people who haven't had a digital background. They might have been in retail, in, I don't know, any profession, and they want to retrain into digital. And the huge majority of them, and Fleur will know this from her own business as well, the huge majority of them get a good job at the end of it. So it is just so obvious to me that the nation should be having digital retraining on steroids. The jobs are there, and they're not just average jobs, they're really good jobs with prospects. And actually there are also youngsters who don't have the skills. So if I could have the Secretary of State for Education in my flat here as I am now, and tell him what needs to happen, I would say, put so much cash, as much as you can muster, behind this, because it will give so many young people a real opportunity, and it will strengthen our economy going forward. So I can't stress it enough. And what I would just say in our defence is we have done this with these boot camps, lots of other digital things as well, but it's the one that stands out. And when the Prime Minister was talking about the skills strategy, he called out what had happened here as pioneering. And now it's taken nationally. We had about £6.5 million for it. I'd have wanted 66.5 million, frankly. So we can multiply it many times over. So that's what we should do. So really interesting question. Thank you, Abdul. No, it wasn't Abdul. Abdul was the previous question. My apologies.
Yes, yeah, that was our final question, that one, and that's all the questions we've got. So I would like to thank everybody who's been here tonight. For Andy, I'd like to thank all the people who put questions to him, and I'd like to thank you, Andy, and wish you the very best of luck in the forthcoming elections.
Well, Fleur, thank you very much. Thank you for what you do for your city. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and of course, most importantly, thank you to everybody who is on the line asking questions, because after all, you're the stars of the event. And I've enjoyed it. So, and there's so much to look forward to and celebrate in Coventry at the moment. So let's look forward to the 15th of May and the opening up. Thank you very much indeed. Cheerio, bye.